I couldn't believe he did this while I was in labor. You spend years building a life with someone, sharing secrets, dreams, toothbrush holders, and you never imagined that the person standing beside you could one day become the reason you shatter. I was 35, 9 months pregnant, and completely convinced that Greg, my husband, was still my safe place. But I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. My name is Emily Sanders, and for most of our 6 year relationship, I thought I was one of the lucky ones. Greg had the kind of magnetic confidence that made people lean in when he spoke. He made life feel like a well edited movie: weekend getaways, impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, handwritten sticky notes on the fridge that said, "Can't wait to meet our little girl." He wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend, my biggest fan, the person I pictured growing old with. The first few years of our marriage were full of warmth and possibility. We built our little home together from scratch. Every piece of furniture, every family recipe, every dream etched into the walls like paint. When we found out we were pregnant with Lily, our world bloomed. Greg cried when I told him. He read parenting blogs, bought books about baby psychology, and insisted on being in the delivery room for every second. I felt chosen, I felt loved. But somewhere between painting the nursery and timing contractions, things began to shift. Subtly at first: missed calls, colder hugs, more time at the office than usual. He blamed stress, deadlines, not wanting to burden me while I was pregnant. I wanted to believe him, and maybe that's why I did, for far too long. Because when you're about to become a mother, you cling to the idea that the father of your child wouldn't lie to you. Still, my instincts whispered things I didn't want to hear. I noticed unfamiliar perfume on his collar once, but he brushed it off as a client meeting. His phone never left his hand. And when I'd ask simple questions like who he was texting, I'd get vague answers or a tired sigh. "Emily, don't be paranoid." And I'd nod. Because I didn't want to push. Because I wanted to keep my family whole. Because I thought he would never betray me like that. Greg had been talking about this summer work party for weeks. "It's a big deal," he said. "Everyone's bringing their partners. You should come." I was nearly 7 months pregnant, swollen ankles, constant nausea, and a deep exhaustion that sleep never fixed. But he insisted. "You're still part of this world, Em. They want to meet the amazing woman behind the man." So I said yes. The party was held at a colleague's estate. Manicured gardens, soft jazz playing through hidden speakers, white wine flowing freely. Greg looked like he belonged there. Sharp suit and dazzling smile, a man climbing the ladder. He introduced me to everyone, but something about the way he did it felt controlled, rushed. He would cut conversations short, redirect attention, always keep us moving. It didn't feel like pride, it felt like strategy. Then I met Lisa, blonde, polished, and about 10 years younger than me. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, too much. "So you're Emily," she said with a sugary tone, taking both my hands in hers. "Greg talks about you all the time." I smiled, but something tightened in my chest. Her gaze was steady, assessing, and the way she laughed at everything Greg said, too loud, too performative, it set off something deep in my gut. Then, in one subtle move, she placed her hand on Greg's arm. Just a light touch during a joke, but it lingered. Later, while nibbling on cheese skewers at the buffet, I casually asked Greg, "So, Lisa, she's very friendly, just a colleague?" His reaction was immediate. A flicker in his eyes before he shrugged and said, "She works with me on some campaigns. You're reading into things. You know your hormones are all over the place right now." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It felt like he was closing a door I hadn't asked to open. I tried to laugh it off. "Maybe it's just the hormones," I echoed, forcing a grin. But my instincts were wide awake now. The look Lisa gave him when she thought I wasn't watching. The way Greg suddenly checked his phone the moment she walked away. These weren't hormonal illusions. They were red flags dressed up as coincidences. And I had ignored that feeling once before. I promised myself I wouldn't do it again. The rest of the evening, I kept quiet, watching, absorbing. When Greg touched my back, I felt it differently, like a performance rather than affection. Lisa avoided me after that one encounter, and Greg seemed relieved when we left. In the car, he talked about work, about plans, about the baby. But in my mind, I replayed Lisa's hand on his arm again and again, and in my belly, my daughter kicked, like a silent warning I didn't yet understand. Weeks passed after that summer party, and I tried to quiet the voice in my head. Maybe I really was just hormonal. Lisa had been a little too friendly, sure, but Greg was attentive at home. He made tea for me when my feet were swollen. He talked about how excited he was to teach our baby how to ride a bike. He even assembled the crib himself one weekend. I started to believe I had imagined it all. Then, one Wednesday morning, everything changed. I was folding laundry in the nursery, tiny onesies and socks barely the size of my palm, when a sharp, unexpected pain gripped my belly. I froze. Another contraction followed, then another. My breath caught. This is too soon, I thought. 3 weeks early? I reached for my phone and called Greg. No answer. Called again, straight to voicemail. I tried not to panic, but each minute that passed brought more pain, more fear. My contractions intensified and reality set in. I was in labor. I had no choice but to call an ambulance. Within minutes, paramedics were helping me down the stairs. My hospital bag was still half packed, the baby seat uninstalled. I was barely able to speak through the contractions, but I kept clutching my phone, redialing Greg again and again. Nothing. Not a single text, not even a read receipt. That silence. It rang louder than any scream. At the hospital, the nurses were kind. They reassured me the baby was doing well, that everything was progressing safely, but I could barely hear them over the ringing in my ears. Where was Greg? I started to wonder if he'd been in an accident. Had something happened on the road? Was he even on the business trip he claimed to be on? That thought hit me like a second wave of pain, one no medication could dull. And then I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl with a full head of dark hair and the most powerful lungs I'd ever heard. The room was filled with lights, beeping machines, and strangers in scrubs, but not him. A nurse cut the cord, a nurse held my hand, a nurse placed my baby on my chest as I sobbed, not from exhaustion, but from heartbreak. I had always imagined Greg beside me in this moment, crying, happy tears, kissing my forehead. But he had abandoned us before she even took her first breath. After they cleaned the baby and I was left alone in the room, I stared out the window with my daughter sleeping on my chest. The sky was soft gray, quiet, like the calm after a storm. And in that stillness, I felt something change inside me. I didn't know what had happened yet, but I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that Greg hadn't just missed the birth. He had chosen not to be there. And whatever the reason was, it would break me open in ways I hadn't imagined. The next morning, just as the nurses were helping me sit up, the door creaked open, and there he was, Greg. Standing in the doorway with messy hair, an out-of-place smile, and a bouquet of crushed flowers in his hand like nothing had happened. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. But no, he was real. He had really missed everything. Emily, he said breathlessly, I'm so sorry. My phone died and then it broke. I didn't get your messages. I only found out this morning when Mark texted me that you'd gone into labor. I came as soon as I could. I stared at him, stunned. My throat tightened with rage, disbelief, sadness, everything boiling inside me like a storm with no place to go. Greg, I whispered, my voice trembling, you missed the birth of your daughter. Do you even understand what that means? I know, and I feel awful, he said, stepping closer. But I'm here now. I'm here for you, for her. I shook my head. You weren't there when I needed you the most. You didn't hold my hand. You didn't see her take her first breath. You didn't cut the cord. A stranger did. Do you know what it felt like to look around and realize you weren't coming? Greg opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop him. Don't tell me about a broken phone. That's the best you've got? A broken phone? You could have borrowed one, called the hospital, called my mom, anything. The room was silent except for our baby's soft breathing in the bassinet. I turned away from him. I don't want to hear another excuse, Greg. Not now. His voice softened. Please, Em, let's just talk. But I'd already turned my back because at that moment I realized something chilling. It wasn't just that he missed the birth, it's that I no longer believed he had a good reason. The days and weeks that followed were complicated. Greg, to his credit, tried to step up. He was helpful, changing diapers, bringing me food, staying up with the baby when I was too exhausted to move. From the outside, we looked like a couple rediscovering each other through parenthood. But inside me, something had shattered. It's hard to explain, but it was like a switch had flipped. I appreciated what he did, sure, but the trust I had in him, the belief that he'd always be there for me, was gone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. I kept replaying the night of my daughter's birth over and over, the silence, the excuses, the timing. Friends and family came by to visit the baby, and we smiled through it. I held my daughter while pretending everything was fine. I lied with my face because the truth in my heart was too heavy to say aloud. Then one afternoon, a visitor rang the bell, and when I opened the door, I froze. It was Lisa. She smiled, holding a gift bag and a little pink stuffed bunny. "Hi, I thought I'd stop by. Greg told me it was okay." It struck me as odd. Lisa and I weren't close. We'd only met briefly at that company summer party. Why would she come by? And why now? Still, I invited her in because my instinct to be polite was stronger than the discomfort twisting in my gut. We sat awkwardly, Lisa making small talk while cooing at the baby, complimenting her eyes, her name, even the nursery decor. But the more I watched her, the more uneasy I felt. There was something too familiar about her comfort here, too relaxed, too knowing. And then I saw it. Not anything big, just a glance. The way her hand brushed Greg's arm as he walked past. The smile they shared, subtle, almost unnoticeable. But to me, it was like a crack of thunder in a silent room. My breath caught in my throat. That memory of the summer party came flooding back. How she touched his shoulder then. How weird he acted when I asked about her. I had written it off as pregnancy hormones. But now, holding my newborn baby in my arms, I realized it had been intuition. And I had ignored it. After Lisa left, I waited for the right moment. When Greg was in the shower and the baby was napping, I picked up his phone. My hands trembled. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed answers, real ones. I went through his photos, knowing full well he rarely deleted anything. And then I found them: selfies, hotel room backgrounds, wine glasses. Lisa in a robe, her head resting on Greg's shoulder, his hand on her thigh. And the timestamp? Exactly the time I was alone in that hospital room, screaming, crying, bringing our child into the world without him. While I was giving birth to our daughter, Greg was in a hotel bed with Lisa. My knees buckled. I sank to the floor, phone still in hand, tears spilling faster than I could stop them. I had suspected something, but to see it confirmed in such a raw, undeniable way, it broke me all over again. I looked at the tiny face of my sleeping daughter and felt both overwhelming love and the sharp stab of betrayal. I had done the hardest thing I had ever done, and he had lied, abandoned me, and chosen her. This wasn't just about a broken phone anymore. This was the truth, and I would never be able to unsee it. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even ask him why, because by the time I learned the truth, I already knew what I had to do. There was no conversation that could fix what Greg broke, no explanation that would soften what he did. He could have been honest. Yes, it would have hurt deeply, but at least then I could have healed with clarity. Instead, he left me alone. He lied while I was bringing life into the world. He chose betrayal over bravery, so I made my decision quietly. Over the course of the next few weeks, while pretending everything was fine, I worked in silence. I called lawyers, I figured out my finances, I learned what my rights were, how to protect my daughter and myself. I looked into housing, made copies of important documents, and got everything in place for a clean break. Every step was painful, but every step also felt like a brick laid on the road back to me. Greg's office was an hour away from home, and that worked to my advantage. I had time to think, to breathe, to plan. And when everything was finally ready, when the papers were signed, the arrangements made, and the strength gathered, I drove to his office with our daughter in her car seat, sleeping peacefully in the back. He didn't see it coming. When I arrived, I walked through those glass doors like I had every right to be there, because I did. I greeted the receptionist with a warm smile, introduced myself politely, and asked if Greg was in. She looked confused, but buzzed me through. The moment Greg saw me, his eyes widened with surprise. "Emily?" he said, his face lighting up. "What are you doing here?" His smile faded as he noticed I wasn't smiling back. Then his gaze dropped to our daughter, and he rushed over, excited. "Is everything okay?" I nodded. "Everything's fine." But then I caught her, Lisa, sitting across the room, staring at me with eyes full of panic. Her lips curled into a forced smile, but the tension in her posture gave her away. She knew. She didn't know what exactly, but she knew something was wrong, and I didn't say a word to her. She wasn't worth it. I looked Greg in the eye and said, "We need to talk." We went into his office and closed the door. He sat behind his desk, still trying to read me, probably scrambling through a list of lies he could offer to get ahead of whatever he assumed I'd found. "I know," I said simply. "I know everything. About Lisa, about the hotel. I saw the pictures. I know what you were doing when I was giving birth to our child. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Don't. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were the signed divorce papers, everything already organized. I've already taken care of the house, the finances, and custody arrangements. You don't need to do anything except sign. He sat there in stunned silence. I didn't come here for a fight. I added, I came here to end this with the same grace you couldn't give me. This is done, Greg. And with that, I turned, picked up my daughter's carrier, and walked out of his office, leaving behind the wreckage of his own choices. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need closure. I had something better. Freedom. The days after that were strange, quiet, but not peaceful. There's a kind of numbness that comes after you finally leave behind the person you once imagined spending forever with. At first, Greg tried to text, to call. At first, it was apologies, then excuses, then desperation. We can work through this. It was a mistake. Don't throw away what we have. Even after everything, after the lies, the betrayal, and the divorce, Greg still tried to claw his way back into my life. Late-night texts, long emails filled with apologies, and desperate voicemails where his voice cracked as he begged for forgiveness. We can fix this, Emily. I made mistakes, but I love you. I love our family. Please, just give me one more chance. But every message he sent only made it more clear. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry for the consequences. The version of him I once loved no longer existed. And no matter how many times he begged, I had nothing left to give him. But what he never understood was that he had already thrown it away long before I walked into his office. I didn't respond, not once, because there was nothing left to say. The divorce moved quickly, thanks to all the preparation I'd done in silence. I kept the house. I secured custody of our daughter. Financially, I made sure Lily and I would be safe. The lawyers took care of the paperwork. I took care of healing. Some days were harder than others. The nights were the worst when the house was quiet and the memories tried to creep back in. I missed who I thought Greg was, not who he turned out to be. But even in those moments, I would walk into Lily's room, see her tiny chest rising and falling in sleep, and remember why I had chosen to be strong. I didn't leave because I didn't love Greg. I left because I finally loved myself more. In time, something unexpected happened. The silence I had once feared became my sanctuary. I started to feel comfortable being alone. I took my daughter to Mommy and Me classes. I enrolled in a few online courses I had put off for years. I redecorated the house, my house, choosing colors and patterns that made me feel alive again. I laughed more, I cried less. Slowly, I began building a version of life that no longer included him, but somehow felt more whole. Friends started inviting me out again. At first, I declined, too nervous, too raw. But one evening, I said yes. We went to a little coffee shop downtown. The conversations were light, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the woman with a broken marriage. I just felt like Emily, a woman, a mother, a survivor. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I was having coffee with a friend when she casually mentioned something that barely made my stomach turn anymore. So, you know Greg and Lisa are seeing each other, right? I blinked for a moment, letting the words settle in the air like dust. I stirred my coffee, looked up, and simply said, I figured they might. The old version of me would have felt my chest tighten, my mind racing with questions. How could he? After everything? Isn't he afraid it'll happen again? But now? Now it barely registered as a ripple. The truth was, I had already mourned that version of my life. Greg and Lisa? They could have each other. If she thought she was special, if he thought this would be different, that was between them now. I no longer carried the weight of trying to understand their choices. That burden wasn't mine anymore. What once would have consumed me with anger or pain now simply felt irrelevant. They were both part of a story I had already closed. I didn't wish them happiness. I didn't wish them misery. I simply wished them distance. As I rocked my daughter to sleep that night, I whispered softly, We're okay. Because we were. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because I chose peace over chaos, and in the end, that was all the closure I needed. I had my daughter, my health, my freedom, and that was more than enough. Sometimes life doesn't give you the ending you expected, but sometimes it gives you a better beginning. And now, when I look at Lily, I see more than just my daughter. I see the reason I found my strength, the reason I refused to stay broken. I don't know if Greg ever truly understood what he lost, but I do know what I gained. Myself. Thank you for listening to my story. What is your story? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.